Hello everyone, my name is Alex with Millie Peas. If you have not met me before, I'm one of the hosts here on Millie's Marketplace Live. And if you didn't know, I am obsessed with scrunchies, and I'm so excited to finally be able to teach you all how to make them. It's a really fun, easy, forgiving project, really great for beginners, or just a nice little gift to accompany any quilt or project you may be making for someone. It's really easy to find a nice scrap that you can use for this project. I would say you need a piece that's about 18 inches or longer, depending on how scrunched up you want it to get at the end, or about 2.5 inches wide, up to maybe even like 6 inches, depending on how fluffy you want it to be. Today I have a piece that's about 20 inches by 3.5 inches wide. By this sizing, as you can probably tell, it's really great, again, for those leftover scraps from your projects, or even the leftover piece of your backing after you get your quilt quilted. You'll have that excess you'll end up trimming off, and it's a really great use of that. Nothing's cuter than having a nice scrunchie to match your new favorite quilt or bag or whatever project you may have been making. Let's go ahead and get started on the scrunchie. So again, I have my long strip of fabric here, and we're going to start with the wonderful Wonder Clips so that we can sew this together. We'll start by putting right sides together. We will end up keeping both ends unsewn, so I will go ahead and kind of put a Wonder Clip down a little bit down here, and I'll typically line up the presser foot with this so I can have a nice portion, about 1 inch to maybe even 2 inches, that is not sewn. So let's go ahead and continue putting them down so we have a nice, easy sewing path that won't come apart. If it doesn't line up perfectly or you end up with some imperfections, don't worry. Like I said before, it is a very, very forgiving project that really at the end of the day, once you're all done, any mistakes that you may have made will end up hidden behind some seams, and it really just scrunches up in the end, so it really ends up hiding any imperfections. Perfect. I'll put this last one down, again, about 1 or 2 inches from the end so that I have a space where I won't have it sewn. Today I'm using our wonderful Juki TL2010Q. I'll line up my presser foot on the end there. I typically go with about a 1/4 inch seam, and I'll just sew along. Removing my Wonder Clips as I go. I will reverse stitch a little bit to really set those seams, and then cut my thread. Now, again, very forgiving, but you want to make sure that if there are any imperfections, at least it's all a sewed tube, and you should, again, have the 2 unsewn ends here. Next up is to flip it inside out. We have our wonderful Clip and Glide bodkin from Clover, and we'll go ahead and lift up that white part to release the teeth, clip that white part down, and then you'll carefully just go ahead and insert it into your tube and turn this nice long tube of fabric right side out. As you get more comfortable or experienced with the project, you can definitely double up on this step and insert the elastic as well. But for the sake of beginning or first time, we're just going to go ahead and do one step at a time. I'll go ahead and unclip it and pull that right out. So now you should have a right side out tube of fabric. As I kind of just hinted, the next step will be to insert our elastic. This is a great time to use up any leftovers from mask making season. Even if you have the ones that have like the little beads, the pre-made packages like these guys. A really great use for any extras you have of these. Just pull off the little tie and you have a nice little strip of elastic. I recommend about 6 to 10 inches. The longer it is, the easier the next steps will be. In this case, I'm using a 1/2 inch elastic. Typically, I would use one that's thinner than this, maybe like a 1/4 inch or so. But for the sake of easy visibility for you guys, we're using a 1/2 inch today. So I will start by clipping this guy onto the bodkin, put that white part down so that it's nice and secure. And I will just start feeding it into the hole. Be sure to hold on to one end of the elastic so it does not end up lost. and you just kind of feed this all the way through until you get to the other side. And you'll just go ahead and unclip it there again. Now you should have your elastic in a big tube of fabric, such as this. The next step is one of those that will kind of vary from person to person. We will be tying the elastic together, but you want to be considering how big you want the ring to be. If it's for a small child, you probably want it to fit around like 3 or 4 fingers, unless you want to go ahead and like double wrap it. Then you can definitely make it a little bit looser. If it's for a friend or maybe yourself and you have a lot of thick, long hair, you'll definitely want to make sure it'll probably fit comfortably around the wrist, especially if it's a gift and you think they might want to wear it fashionably around their wrist. So again, this is really up for your own interpretation. I like to just kind of get one tie in there, kind of get a feel for it, see how it fits around the wrist, and then go in with my second tie to really knot it down. Perfect, nice and taut. For the sake of goodwill, I'll go ahead and add a third one, just to make sure it's nice and secure and lasts a long time. Yeah, it fits very nice. With this excess, we don't really want that sitting in there. That's a little bit too much. So I'm going to whip out my handy, pretty Ginger scissors and cut off some excess. Leave probably about like a 1/4 inch there or so. It is wrapped around 3 times, so it should be a pretty sturdy knot. Give it a tug, make sure it's lasting well. And then we'll go on to the next step of joining these together. And again, using our Wonder Clips. Now that we have the elastic in the fabric and tied off, we're going to start the process of finishing it off. So you'll want to make sure that you have fabric that is on this right side together, joining on the edge here. You don't want to end up with any accidental twist or awkward situations like that. This is where the longer that you have the unsewn portion, the easier it will be. So I'm going to go and kind of line up both sides. One side's a little bit longer for me. Again, it's rather forgiving, so don't worry if it's not perfect. And I just want to make sure that it's lined up as much as it possibly can be. So I'll end up with a little bit of a poof, but as I go in and sew right along this edge, it'll be, again, rather forgiving and connect both ends of the fabric. Now that we have both sides clipped up and ready to sew, again, I will sew right along this top seam. I try to get down as far down as I can, as it will make the next piece a little bit easier. We do end up trimming it. If you want to sew right along that edge, you can definitely go for it, whatever is easiest for you and your machine. Of course, do leave a nice seam allowance of at least a 1/4 inch, but if you can go a little bit further down, go for it. Again, it makes that next step a lot easier. This is also a great time to use an awl, one of my favorite tools. This is our Singer awl, and it is really great for kind of smoothing out the fabric, getting rid of any bunches, and just kind of help guide everything through for a nice, easy seam. So we'll go ahead and get this under the foot, get everything down and ready to be sewn, and use this awl to really kind of smooth everything out and guide it, stopping as necessary. I'll go ahead and backstitch here. It's not as necessary. I'll cut the thread, and there we go. Just double check, make sure that I really got it through both layers of fabric the whole way through. Now whenever I go ahead and pull this taut, I should have a connected piece of fabric with no excess twist or anything of that sort. I'll kind of go and turn this so that the sewn part, or the open part, is pointed out, and just gently tuck this in. The final step is really to go in and top stitch right along here. This is a really great time, again, to use Wonder Clips. There are way too many uses for Wonder Clips if you haven't been using them before. Trust me, you are missing out and making life a little bit harder than it really needs to be. So let's go ahead and clip along here. Make sure that that's as smooth as possible. Again, it's a nice forgiving project, but obviously it can save a little bit of hassle if you get everything lined up the first time. So pulling it taut, I'm going to go ahead and get it under the foot. This time I'm not worried about a seam allowance. I'm going to try to get it as close to the edge as possible. And just going to go ahead and sew along. I'll do a few back stitches at the beginning, want to make sure it stays, and then just keep sewing. And a few back stitches at the end. Double check my work, make sure it went through everything, and we are all good. Perfect. Next up, I like to kind of twist that inside, scrunch it all up, and next thing you know, your seam is completely hidden and it is ready to be worn in your hair, on your wrist, whatever you like. Your scrunchie is all ready for you or your recipient to enjoy.